we've got the entire world on our side.
So 50 years ago, an important amendment was made, it was Title IX. And Title IX, of course, was intended to facilitate more equality among men and women and in any federally funded organization in the United States, right? And huge strides have been made since Title IX. Notwithstanding all these great successes, there are significant challenges that have also arisen.
I feel like within sports, it's almost as if there's a better direct pipeline for boys from amateur to pro level, whereas with girls, they're left behind. I mean, from elementary to high school and to college, those transitions are key. And then I feel like if girls are not supported within the community, by their coaches, by their families, and by their peers, and they're not being invested in, then they tend to fall back, and that's where we lose a lot of them advancing forward.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Title IX was about equality. Right. And so, I mean, one way of thinking about Title IX is you're opening the door, but it doesn't necessarily mean everyone's going to go through it. Right?
You made a great analogy of the door and the doors opening, right? But the reality is even when doors open, there's some standing at the front waiting to go into the doors, and there's still some behind them as well trying to get into the doors. And what oftentimes happens is that those standing in the front will be the first ones to, benefit from those doors opening. And so I think, when we think about those kinds of strategies that we're adopting, we need to consider as well who is standing in the back. And we need to be thinking about, mitigating for those barriers that they may be facing to be able to enter at the same time.
Everything you said, like it reminds me of something that Shireen wrote about the other day. Someone asked her in an audience, like, what were you most blindsided by in your career? And she said white feminism. And that's the whole idea that, like, you have white women around you, as a person of color, you have white women around you that you expect to help lift you up and help get you to where you want to go. But often what happens is they get the opportunities and you get left behind. The idea is that we're there to support each other, and this strategy or this Title IX or whatever it is, it's there to help women get to this level playing field, but it doesn't proportionately benefit women of color.
As a female athlete, as a high-performing athlete, now as a sports journalist, as a black athlete, as a black journalist, tell me about that sense of responsibility that you have, or that you feel you have.
Yeah, no, I think now that I'm wearing the journalist lens, I think about how I didn't have any representation in Canada in the media when it came to sports. Kayla Gray, she's great. She came too late, essentially. She was already in the industry when I was in the industry. But when I was growing up, my first example of a black woman on TV that could cover sports, specifically the NBA, was Sage Steele. Now, don't necessarily believe in her political views and stuff like that, but just seeing a woman that wait, she has my hair. Oh, she has my skin tone. I didn't even know I could do it. Oh my gosh, she's so pretty. I was like, what? You could do this? And that was kind of the light bulb moment in my head at the time in high school. So when I think about representation and kind of the responsibility I have now, I have a responsibility to be that for other women.
You can't be it unless you see it.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. It's really hard to be it. I mean, it's not impossible because clearly it's been done. But even throughout my days in university, now I was taking sport media. All my classmates would never choose me for on air unless I really pushed. Yeah, none of them, because they took and in retrospect and maybe maturity. Before I was really mad about it, but now I'm like, well, how could they choose me if they've never seen a woman like me on TV?
I think of my journey. I'm kind of through the door right now, right? And having the opportunity to inspire is a big part of my journey and what I'm living right now. Am I inspiring young black women to be who I am right now? Yeah. Right? And the big thing that has been out there, you can't be what you can't see, right? And I'm here right now. So I have to continue to inspire. I have to continue to show my other counterparts, there are opportunities, but you have to go after them.
So how do you do
right?
that as
you have to go after them.
You know, as you say, you've gone through the door. You've had a terrific playing career, and now coaching. How does one actively inspire other women and girls, and also Black women and girls, as you've noted?
Putting them in situations to feel confident in as a leader, as a captain, as a facilitator in anything that we do. As a coach, putting them in positions to feel like they are powerful enough to use your voice and have your voice be heard, so that you could take whatever lessons you're learning on the court off the court as well.
Yeah, the key is like pulling them into these
Right.
positions. And like research shows that boys get pushed into sport opportunities a lot more than girls. And for girls, you got to pull them in. You got to provide these opportunities and open the doors and say, hey, this is something that like could work for you. Like come in, you know.
I think back to 2021 on TSN, history was made because there was the first all-female
That was awesome.
team for the
was
sports.
all-female
Yeah,
broadcast.
for the
Yeah.
Toronto Raptors.
Yeah.
I was like, can I be in this?
Yeah. 20 years ago, in terms of media coverage and television coverage of female sports, was about 4 or 5%. It's still only 4 or 5%. So it may feel like there's more, but actually it hasn't improved all that much at all.
We are absolutely thrilled to be here. And to all the young girls that are currently watching this broadcast, we welcome you especially. When we were die-hard basketball fans as kids, we never saw this. We never saw an all-female broadcast.
The Raptors had the first all-female broadcast crew. I guess it was a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. What was going through your mind when you saw that?
Well, when I first heard about it, it was because they asked me to do the promo for it. Like, we're doing an all-women's broadcast. We really want you to be the voice that promotes it and gets all audiences aware about it. And I was like, okay, this is big. This is really big.
Megan McPeak, who handled play-by-play, Kia Nurse, Kayla Gray, Kate Biernes, and Amy Audebert made history last night.
It was impactful as history, but I think we need more of it, and you don't want to do it for tokenism reasons, because in the ultimate world, we would just have an equal, I guess, representation of women within broadcast, and we don't need games like that where it's just all women's only.
Right.
But the reality is that on a day-to-day basis, how much all men's broadcasts do we have?
Yeah.
We have a lot. There's a lot. You go around the league, and maybe if you do have a woman in the broadcast, she's a sideline reporter,
Right.
and that's it, But that's why I think it's so impactful to have women like Amy and Megan that are play-by-play and analysis, and they take up space in this realm because you just don't see that. And once again, it goes back to if you could see it, you could be it, right?
Yeah. We started this conversation talking about Title IX. And yet, I have to say, as I read, for instance, around the Yates report from the U.S. around the systemic abuse that we see in women's soccer, we've seen this as well in terms of gymnastics, and the patriarchal structures where men in leadership positions, coaches, feel that they can perpetrate this abuse, and to do it systemically, and for so long doing it without any punitive action being taken.
I think back to the American women's gymnastics team and the push for the Me Too movement, and they were at the forefront of it, especially when you had Aly Raisman and Simone Biles, and they were coming out and they were talking about the abuse that they faced, and there was a whole legal case that went international media. I think that it goes to show that it does, for example, the courage that they had to come forward and tell their stories was crucial. And then also, I think that it goes to show that a lot of what happens behind the scenes is suppressed, and the athletes feel that they need to suppress this, because if the people they're accusing of these abuses are not fairly held accountable, then they fear losing everything that they've worked for.
And I think that's key. I think it's that lack of accountability that exists within these kinds of organizations as well, that doesn't protect the athletes, right? When there's no accountability for people doing this, it can be suppressed because there's nothing.
Why would you step forward then?
Why would you step forward? Exactly, because there's nothing to protect you. You have no rights. When we have better representation amongst the decision makers, amongst those who are holding people accountable, people will be held accountable. But right now, there's no one to advocate for those athletes in those spaces. There are no other women in those spaces and in those decision-making tables who can advocate and say, you know, when one steps forward, no, we need to make sure that this is taken care of and that someone is held accountable and that we go through due process.
It's hard to speak up when you feel like there's that huge power imbalance, as whether it's coach to athlete or male head coach to female athlete. It's hard to speak up and speak out in those instances. So if you do see things, you have to report it. You have to say things.
The NBA is oftentimes celebrated for having really, been really vocal and activist during the Black Lives Matter movement in the summer of 2020. But of course, the reality is it's the WNBA that really led the way, right?
Mm-hmm. They are courageous women. And I do think that there's a level of courage to be a female athlete at that level. You are already going against society's norms just by being a female athlete alone. They are embracing just organically and raw, like who they are. They love a sport. They love to sweat. They love to be competitive and
And they're the world's best.
And they are the world's best at it too. So they are already going against the grain, so they're not afraid to go against the grain in other ways too. And they also have so much intersectionality within the communities. Now, the reason why I think that they're overshadowed oftentimes is their voices often kind of can get, well, not washed out but it's a matter of like seeing them on TV. They're not on like the cereal boxes as much as like the NBA players are. Yeah. So even though NBA players actually, they give a lot of credit to the WNBA. LeBron has been very outspoken about hey, we got this from the WNBA. The people are like, yeah, that's nice. Oh wow, the NBA is doing so much. Well, LeBron's like, WNBA wore t-shirts before us.
First of all, the social activism that the WNBA has led has been really important. So it's really about a purpose-driven organization as well. And of course, the stars that have come out of the WNBA they're huge, right? I mean, they're big names and popular athletes and so on. I mean, it strikes me that that's an area where we might see some change.
I think slowly, but I think there are so many underlying issues and challenges and barriers that they face that doesn't allow it to progress as fast as I think it can and should. Because when you even think about, one of the biggest things, the discussions that we're talking about right now is Brittany Griner and the situation that she's in. And, one of the things that I read and kind of comments that I saw is that she had to go and play in Russia because she didn't have, they don't make enough money here in the States in the WNBA to be able to have a full year's salary. So a player like her is forced to go and play in a country like Russia or, internationally because the WNBA does not provide a living wage salary for someone like her to be able to train fully and, make the income that she requires and be a professional athlete as men are.
That was me. I played for 10 years professional basketball in countries in Europe, a year in Australia. And I had to go over there. That was the only way I could, again, make money and play the sport I love, but I was doing it because I wanted to represent my country in the summer.
Yeah, think about the irony. You wanted to play for your country.
I wanted to play for my country.
And in order to do that, you had to go...
I had to go overseas.
Overseas to play.
You grew up watching the NBA, like hoping that you'd like represent your city, your team, your country, and then...
Yeah, I grew up watching the NBA first. And then the WNBA came out, and I was like, "Whoa, this is amazing! Hopefully, this could be me one day." And I grew up watching the Olympics. It's like the highlight of all sports ever, and to become an Olympian was probably my biggest dream. So going overseas was pivotal and essential for me at the end of the day.
Like growing up, I had this if someone would ask me like, what do you want to do like with rugby, it was in the back of my mind like, oh, I would love to play rugby for Team Canada, but it just wasn't something I would like ever say out loud because it was like ridiculous. Like how can someone like me play rugby for Team Canada, you know?
Only recently did it become really acceptable for women to be able to play sports with hijab.
Yeah.
You know, at those high levels.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, you think of the journey of Bilqis Abdul Qadir, who had to fight, you know, she had to go to, you know, the White House to petition to
multiple times
for people to recognize and acknowledge that a hijab is not harmful to anybody else on a basketball court.
Yeah.
You know, that she can wear a headscarf and have an appropriate sport hijab and still play the sport and participate, but nobody thought that that was important. And so just those kinds of barriers, like it adds these layers and levels so much.
Yeah. And not everyone is like Bilqis, like not everyone has the determination and the strength and the perseverance that she had to go to these literally like FIBA, like she went to the top level of FIBA. To have those meetings with like white men who literally will not budge, they're like, well, yeah, sure, I'll book a meeting with you, and then like laugh when she leaves. It's like who's gonna do all that, right? And why did she have to do all that for all these people when these decision makers could have been a little more open, been a little more, you know, inclusive, and not like created these barriers for someone to break down.
I was just reminded recently of the beach handball ruling, right? In which the players, the athletes, were required by regulation to wear bikini bottoms. According to International Handball Federation regulations, female athletes must wear bikini bottoms with a maximum side width of 10 centimeters,
Wow.
a close fit, and, quote, cut on an upward angle toward the top of the leg. This is 2021.
It's really incredible when you look at it, you know, from this perspective, that example, how systemic and structural the issue is.
Right.
Right? It's not at an individual level. It is a larger systemic and structural issue that we're dealing with here when it comes to sexism in sports.
Yeah.
Sisterhood is beautiful, unmatched. Being a baller is moving in any direction. It means knowing who you are, showing up for you, your whole identity. The hardest part, the misconceptions, being underestimated, so we can finally change the narrative.
You know, recently the NCAA allows now athletes to earn money from their name, their image, and their likeness.
Like when I started Hijabi Ballers, we would get like opportunities here and there, and a lot of them were from like big brands that would expect like the payment to be like some gear, and we would take it. And then eventually it was like, no, like I deserve money for my work. It's like a shirt is not good enough, you know? Yeah.
You need to know your worth and your value and lay down the law and not let people walk all over you.
Yeah, especially if they're making money from it, right? Like
yes.
Like if it's an ad that's like going to sell clothes or sell whatever, like you have to consider like where's, you know, that money has to go back to the community.
Well, what kind of message are you sending if the people in your commercial are not even being compensated adequately?
Are there concerns with respect to, you know, being able to earn from your image? Are there concerns that that image is not an image that is determined by the athlete herself?
You know, as much as, you know, society is progressing and we're doing better on a daily basis, but, you know, colonialism and patriarchy and all of those issues are still, you know, they just become a lot more subversive. And so in anything we do, we have to be very aware of it, because it can creep in so easily. Athletes have to understand as well, like, you have to maintain your own agency even in this. Yes, there's going to be an exchange here of service for benefit for you, but what are you willing to give? What are you exchanging in that negotiation, right? What are you giving?
And you control the terms.
Do you control the terms? Yeah. That's exactly it, right? And are you selling your integrity, your morals, your values for what? For monetary gain?
Do you think things would change more rapidly if we saw more women in leadership roles in these organizations, and women of color specifically?
Recently, I had the opportunity to work on a commercial for Nike, and that one was centered around women's empowerment in sports. And everyone in the commercial was a woman of color, and you had girls who were featured in the commercial. They were a real girls team from the GTA. They were young, and they were so excited to be part of it. And then also other key players were featured in the ad related to sports media and coaching and management. And I think seeing all of those faces put together, I was thinking to myself, outside of the commercial, I really wish that this was reality.
So the ads seem more aspirational to you than reality?
Yeah, I wish I could see what I saw in the commercial on the outside, but I don't.
It goes back to what I said. You can't be what you can't see, right? You got to be able to see these things more for our young athletes or young women growing up, trying to be at the table or wanting to be at the table.
So Toronto's been talking about lobbying, or maybe it's just me and others who've been talking about lobbying to get a WNBA team here in Toronto.
Yes, all
and
for that.
Yeah, right? And I gotta believe, like I would be first in line to get season tickets for that. I mean, I gotta believe that that would be a success here in Toronto.
I think Toronto is the ideal place for a WNBA team. I think they would be highly supported. I think that, just as a, culture of Toronto, but also Canada, I mean, Toronto is, yes, okay, Raptors is here, but you get support, Raptors get support from all over Canada. It is the pride of Canada. And I think that if we had a WNBA team here, it would be the pride of Canada. And I think as a country, we would rally around a team like that.
Yeah, and just imagine like the young girls growing up and playing basketball. Like, you don't have to dream of, being on the WNBA in the States. Like, you can dream of being and representing your city.
As if she isn't already the anomaly if she succeeds, and the expectation if she fails. Excellence naturally radiates from her, but sometimes she feels like it has to be there. Tattooed on both arms, she wishes she could fail in front of you without everyone portraying her greatness as accidental. The star student, the star athlete, being the star until she is just darkness. Sometimes stars burn out, sometimes stars turn to dust and fall out of the sky, and everyone finds amusement in the fireworks, the pyrotechnics of her exhaustion.
Growing up, who was the role model that inspired you to strive for the kind of excellence that you're achieving?
For me, in terms of athletics, I definitely, throughout my life, I've always been looking at Serena Williams' career, being the best of the best in her sport. And also being a Black woman, I think that was incredible to see. And growing up, often being the only Black woman in a space, and it's sort of, you're fed this narrative where you are the anomaly if you succeed and the expectation if you fail. But she beat that out of the court, gone. She's incredible.
Definitely. I've had many, famous athletes and so on that I've admired through the years, growing up, Lisa Leslie. Actually, even Penny Hardaway was one of my favorites. I still wear his shoes. Anytime I find his shoes,
Hardaway, wow.
Penny Hardaway,
Jeez,
yes.
That's
I was a huge fan, so, kind of 90s.
Yeah.
But, for me, I think the most inspirational person I've had was actually the person who taught me my first layup, which was my high school coach. Her name is Dawn Gong.
Yeah, this was in South Africa.
Yeah, so this was in South Africa. So I grew up in apartheid South Africa, and she's a white woman. She really pulled me out and said, you need to play basketball, and kind of put that first basketball in my hand and taught me to play the sport. But she coached me all through my high school years and instilled such a confidence in me to want to do so much in a sport that was white dominated in segregation.
We all have different journeys, and that's some things that I'm trying to preach to my athletes. Like, everybody's journey is going to be different. You got to find that path and be true to your path. It's not going to be a straight line. It's going to be windy. We all have windy roads, but when you get there, it's worth it.